Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda. It's very noisy in my house today, and that's okay because my husband is putting up the Christmas tree, so he gets to make noise. He can even swear. That's allowed. I mean, when he gets to the lights, it's kind of a given. There's going to be swearing. My son is helping, so you might hear him as well. Just saying. I mean, would it be one of my videos without a bunch of background noise? Probably not. Anyway, I am here to wrap up my November reading. So November was an interesting month for reading. It started fine, and then let's say after about 5 days into the month, it really picked up for reading because I was using reading to escape reality. There are worse things I could have done, so don't at me about that. There are worse things I could have done. As I say, at least it wasn't drugs. So yes, I did quite a bit of reading this month. Not a bunch of reading this last week though, because of Thanksgiving, but this month I did a lot of reading. I read 19 books this month, and some of them are pretty darn big. I should say I finished 19 books this month because one of them I started on January 1st, and I just finished it this month. We'll get to that. I didn't DNF any books. I was tempted a couple times, but I didn't. And my average rating was a 3.9, which is good. 3.9, that's pretty good. As for format, 11 were in print. I have a huge pile right here. We're gonna go through it, the very big pile. I'm gonna move this chair, so put the pile down there. So 11 were in print, 5 were ebooks. I had 2 audiobooks, and then I had one, which is my Shakespeare play, and this is what I do every time, is I listen to it as I read it, so it's both print and audio. Now, as for genres, I do not consider classic to be a genre, but I do note when I read a classic. And for my purposes, a classic is a book that's at least 50 years old and still in print. So of those, I had 3. And then if we break down the rest of my genres, I had 3 that were sort of general fiction, 3 mystery, 3 history, mystery and history, 2 memoir, 2 general nonfiction, 1 each of thriller, historical fiction, horror, magical realism, a play, and a time capsule book. And for those of you who don't know, a time capsule book is a book that's written in its current time, but you're reading it at a later time, so it's a time capsule of that. It's not historical fiction because it's written in that time, but you're reading it past that time, and it really is tied to the time in which it's written. So there you go. And now I'm going to go through my books, and if you haven't seen this before, I have done a lot of different things, but I've kind of settled on, yes, I rate my books. If you follow me on Storygraph or Goodreads, you'll see star ratings. Do not put a lot of stock in those. I recommend books by Up in the Air, which is, I for some reason, I'm still thinking about it, or I just feel like I can't give it a rating for whatever reason. Not recommended. Recommended, which is like, yeah, read this book, but maybe only these people, or maybe keep this in mind. So it's like, yeah, you can read this book, but there's some things about it. Highly recommended, which is go get this book. And then the one time where a star rating really counts, which is 5 stars. And that's a best ever book, one of my all-time favorites. So let's go through it. I have one Up in the Air, and that is The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson. I started this book on November 1st, and it took me, I read it. Oops. I was about halfway through when Election Day happened, and this book changed after that. The way I was perceiving this book, the way it was affecting me. And because of that, I don't feel that I can really talk about it objectively because, yeah, it's just weird. I will say it's a good book. Like, this is what I said when I talked about it before. It's a good book. It's well written. It's well researched. It's Erik Larson there. But as for my own experience, this was not a good time for me to be reading it, unfortunately. So I'm just gonna say, I'm not gonna say whatever. I'm just gonna say this. I will have to reread this at some point in the future, and then I will be able to have a better opinion about it. Okay, and now we're gonna move on to not recommended. So a lot of people disagree with me on this one, but I really did not like Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaghy. That was a book that didn't work for me. I felt like there was too much going on in it. The end was bizarre and ridiculous, but also predictable, which was an interesting feat. It just didn't work for me. So I can't recommend it, but I will tell you, there's a lot of people who will recommend this book for you. So take that as it is. Just for me, it didn't work for me. So I personally wouldn't recommend it, but a lot of other people would. Okay, so now we're moving on to recommended. And these are ones that I would recommend for certain people, or maybe I recommend it with some caveats. It doesn't mean they're bad books. It just means there might be something that held me back, or there might be something that doesn't make it something that really would appeal to a wide audience. Okay, and the first one is The Grey Wolf by Louise Penny. So there is the obvious that this is 19th in a series, and the Three Pines series you do have to read in order because there's a lot of background stuff. Although this particular one, you only have to read one. You have to, and I can't remember which one. It's the one that's set in the monastery. I think that's The Beautiful Mystery, because it ties back to that. And then a lot of this actually kind of stands on its own. In fact, you probably could read this one on its own. That being said, it is not a mystery, and that is a mystery series. This is a thriller. And so if you're looking for a mystery, you're not going to get it here. There's also, I didn't feel like enough Three Pines, like the town of Three Pines, which I really like. But I enjoyed my time reading it. I mean, it's still worthwhile. It's well written. It's still worthwhile. It just isn't my favorite in the series. But if you read the Three Pines series, read this. You might want to wait until closer to next fall when the next book comes out. Just saying. You might want to hold off on that one until then. Just you might. And then the next book I have that's sort of in this category is Son of a Trickster by Eden Robinson. So I buddy read this with Sarah at Roadworthy, and I enjoyed it. It in the United States, on Goodreads, on Storygraph, which I guess Storygraph is British, but whatever. On both of those, this is labeled as young adult. This is not a young adult book. The main character is 16, I think. So yeah, he is a young adult, but it is not a young adult book. Just the profanity is there's a lot of profanity, which didn't bother me. It just was kind of, I went into this thinking it was a young adult book, and I was very surprised by that. There's a lot of drug use. There's a lot of very detailed descriptions of sexual acts. So there's that. Now, all of those things, if I went into it thinking it was an adult book or knowing that it was adult literature, it wouldn't have bothered me at all. I just was shocked to find it in this book. But this is Indigenous. Eden Robinson is Indigenous, and this is the main character is Indigenous, and there's a lot of Indigenous folklore. So my thing with it is I enjoyed it. I thought it was great, but I also kind of felt like I was missing something. And I think it is elements of the Indigenous folklore that I am just not aware of. And it certainly isn't Eden Robinson's job to educate me on that. But still, I was like, okay, I kind of feel like there's a piece missing. Again, I did enjoy my time reading it, and I would recommend it, just now it's not young adult. It is the first in a trilogy, and I have heard that the trilogy just gets better and better. So I definitely plan to read on in the trilogy at some point. We'll see. I'll probably pick one up next year. We'll just see how it goes. I do know the second book deals with a character introduced in this book, and because of the character and what's going on, I kind of feel like I need to be in the right headspace for it. So it's kind of dependent on that. But yeah, that was Son of a Trickster. The next one I have is, in this category, is The Mighty Red by Louise Erdrich. This is her new release. I buddy read this with Angelia at Read and Reread, and I thoroughly enjoyed.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
The Alexa is talking to me. Anyway, as I said, to be one of my videos without random sounds, I just wasn't expecting that one. Anywho, I buddy read this with Angelia at Read and Reread, and we both enjoyed the experience of reading it. And Louise Erdrich is a great author, and there's some very expected things from Louise Erdrich in this. But I think we both kind of felt like this wasn't her best. If you've never read Louise Erdrich, this might be a good place to start, because kind of there's always something like you want to start maybe not with the best, so things live up, So this would be a good place to start. It stands alone. I do think that it is, I think like the ancestors of the characters here she's written about in the past, I feel like I've read about them, but I don't know. I read her short story collection, which is earlier this year, and I think some of them showed up in that. I felt the ending didn't quite work for me. Not the way it ended, but some of the things she included in the end. I was like, why is this here? Why is this a thing? Why am I reading this? Again, enjoyed the experience. Maybe not the best Louise Erdrich book, but still worth reading. I mean, it's worth reading if you like Louise Erdrich because it is Louise Erdrich. And if you want to start reading Louise Erdrich, you can basically start anywhere with the exception of Future Home of the Living God. And the only reason I would say don't start with that one is it's very atypical of her writing. But you can start with this. So, just a mighty read. Okay, the next one is The Man in Black by Elly Griffiths. I thoroughly enjoyed this. So Elly Griffiths is the author of... My daughter apparently says hi. They're coming down to decorate the tree, apparently. The Man in Black... where was I? Oh, yes. Elly Griffiths. She has three mystery series. She has another one starting next year in 2025. The Ruth Galloway series, the Brighton Mysteries, and the Harbinger Car series. I have read all of Ruth Galloway. It is a complete series. I'm almost caught up with Harbinger Car. I've not read the Brighton Mysteries. I did not have a problem reading this, even though some of the stories refer to the Brighton Mysteries. And some of you refer to all of those series, and then there's some that don't refer to any series. And I really enjoyed this book. I gave this a high rating, but again, don't pay too much attention to star ratings. The only reason it's in this category is it's really for people who've read Elly Griffiths before and want to revisit these characters. Also, if you have not finished the Ruth Galloway series and you want to read it, or you haven't started, you want to read, this will spoil Ruth Galloway. So keep that in mind. If you don't care, fine. Or if you finished it, fine. But this will spoil it. So that's why this was more a really great experience for me. But, it's not something that I would widely recommend for that reason. Okay, what's next? Oh, then I have a memoir that I read with Michael Clark, who's a commenter on a lot of our channels. And we did That Librarian, The Fight Against Book Banning in America by Amanda Jones. This is a memoir by Amanda Jones. She is a middle school librarian in Louisiana. And she attended a public library board meeting. So not her library, public board meeting, because they were there was an agenda item that was like, we're going to revisit our plans for how we handle challenges. And she got up and spoke that this works fine like that. But then she became the object of a lot of online bullying by a certain group of people. And this goes into book banning and what other librarians face. I think it's a really, really important book. I think it's really important. Her message is very, very important. And I loved her sense of humor because it's my sense of humor. But there were some, I think at one point, it's a little bit interesting. She wrote it now for reasons I don't want to get into because it is kind of a spoiler. But if you read a book, you'd understand. Also, I kind of felt like she got a little too personal with talking about some other people, and that made me a little bit uncomfortable to read that, especially when so much of this book was about other people criticizing her unfairly. And she may be, whatever she says might be fair to other people, might be a fair representation of what other people have done. But I still felt like, because it seemed so pointed for someone, I felt a little uncomfortable with it. There's one point where she's talking about someone and she even says, if you live in my town, you know who this person is, which that made me uncomfortable. So that's my drawback with this. However, I think the message on it is so important that the pros outweigh the cons. So there. And then finally, in my recommended, is The Queen of Poisons by Robert Thorogood. This is the third Marlowe Murder Club mystery, and I do really love the Marlowe Murder Club. This one, I will say probably not as memorable. There was a lot of going around between certain characters, which is fine usually, but it seemed a little muddled to me. I enjoyed my time with it. But what really kind of gets me is there's an element of, I think I said fat phobia when I talked about it on Instagram, but I think more like sizeism in this book that I didn't appreciate. I think that was sort of a bad choice, although I understand why they did it, but I think that the character's reaction to this person could have been written differently things like that. That was not great to read, but still a great, the story was great for what it is. Definitely you want to read it. I guess you want to read it before the next one comes out, which comes out, I think, in January. I'm not sure. I have it pre-ordered, but anyway, The Queen of Poisons. Now we're getting to the highly recommended ones. These are ones that I really do recommend. Let me get my list up here. And the first is one that a lot of people have recommended. So this is old news, but The Guncle. I buddy read this kind of like a double buddy read. So I buddy read it with my friend Kim and Karen. We buddy read it. And then I buddy read it on Voxer with Angela. And who else was that? I'm sorry, it was at the beginning of the month. Was it Kim? Kim, was that you? I'm sorry if I messed it up, but it was at the beginning of the month. And I read a lot of books this month and I ran away from reality. Anyway, really, really enjoyed this book. It made me cry in a weird place for a weird reason. I cried over a toilet. Long story short, toilet reminded me of my friend who I lost earlier this year, but I still cried over a toilet. But there you go. It's a very heartwarming story. I enjoyed it. I do plan to read The Guncle abroad, but that feels like a summer book, so I'll probably wait till summer to read it. Okay, the next book I know I buddy read with Kim at Kim's Book Life, and that is finally this book you've seen so many times. And that is Hill Women by Cassie Chambers. I finally read it and I actually really enjoyed it. I did think the middle slogged a little bit, but still, it's fine. That's probably just me. And this is about a person who grew up kind of in and by Appalachia. She spent a lot of time with her grandmother in Appalachia, and she grew up and she got out of Appalachia and she went to an Ivy League school and she got a law degree, and then she entered politics, and she's not that other person who wrote a book. Basically, don't read that other book. It's trash. Read this book. That other book, I just don't. The guys, but this one is really, I really enjoyed this. I think this is a much more effective book on giving the message of like rural America. She articulates herself a lot better. She is not a creep. You don't end this book hating her. She does not throw the communities of Appalachia under the bus to make herself look better. But so this is everything that book should have been. But I did really enjoy this. I am glad that I buddy read it with Kim and I finally finished it. Because you've seen it so many times on TBRs, but it is finally done. All right, what's next? Oh, this is one that I actually been reading for a long time. It's an easy book to pick up and put down. So I read it in the bathroom. Just it was bathroom reading, but it was good. And that is Maeve's Times, in her own words. So this is a collection of pieces that Maeve Binchy wrote for the Irish Times, because she was a longtime writer for the Irish columnist for the Irish Times. This covers everything, and it is arranged chronologically. So it goes from the 60s all the way up to the last one is 2011, and it is about the royal wedding of William and Catherine. So we're covering a lot of period of time, and it's just an abundance of different topics. It is delightful, as you would expect from Maeve Binchy. It is a perfect book to just kind of have and to pick up when you want, because the pieces are really short and you can do that, which is why it took me so long to read this book. I had not read Maeve Binchy for a very, very long time, only because years ago, I read a lot of her at once, and I think I oversaturated, so I took a break and just never went back. So this was my re-entry to Maeve Binchy, and it was a delightful way to do it. I really enjoyed this. If you read Maeve Binchy, I would highly recommend this. Oh, and then a lot of these are print. I'm so proud of myself. I have stuff to show. I have my Agatha Christie that I was supposed to read in December, but screwed up and read in November, and that's Towards Zero. To be fair, I don't know if this is really as good as it felt, but it was what I needed at the time. I read it after the election and I needed escapism, and this just hit the mark. This is a superintendent battle book, and I have not liked superintendent battle books before this. This is the first one that I've really liked. His were also like the Seven Dials mystery. What was the other one? I can't remember what the other one was. See if I can look it up. Nope, it's not listed here. Oh, maybe it is. Because they do the Secret of Chimneys and the Seven Dial mysteries. He does, Superintendent Battle does show up in some of the Poirot mysteries. He shows up in Cards on the Table and Death on the Nile and probably some other ones. And they refer to Poirot a lot in this. So this is in the Poirot universe, but it's Superintendent Battle. But it's people behaving badly at an English estate, and it's what I needed when I needed it, and I found it absolutely delightful. I would say not an on-ramp for Agatha Christie, honestly. I would say get yourself at least one Poirot under your belt before you pick this up. You don't need to read the other Superintendent Battles. They're not that good. Then I have a short story collection. And I really enjoyed this, but I will preface it by saying that it does not have good ratings on Storygraph or Goodreads. I don't agree with those. I thought this was just a really fun spooky season read. I started it in spooky season and I finished it in November. And that is Mystery Lights by Lena Valencia. A lot of these, so it is, it is horror-ish. Some of them are horror, some of them are kind of psychological, thrillery, but that sort of feeling. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are set in the American Southwest, and the sense of place is very strong in it. I really enjoyed this. Some of them are a little bit satirical, which I liked. There's cave monsters, so there's that too. But I enjoyed my time with this book, and it is one I would recommend pretty widely to people. And I would say just ignore what the ratings on Goodreads and Storygraph are, because give it a chance. Give it a chance. I mean, don't always trust ratings. Okay, and then this is sort of an unconventional read, kind of like Maeve's Times. And that is A Gmorning, Good Night, Little Pep Talks for Me and You. So Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote this in like 2017, I think, 2018. Lin-Manuel Miranda started this thing on Twitter back when it was worth being on, where every morning he'd post like an encouraging tweet and every night he'd post an encouraging tweet. And this is a collection of those tweets. And I picked this up to get me through the election season. And you could read this book in half an hour, probably less than half an hour, but I would read one in the morning, one at night, to get me through election season. And then I was going to give it to a friend who I thought it might be helpful for, but then and then November 5th happened. So now I just started it over again because I think I'm going to need this book. But it's delightful. This is a great gift book. If you want to give you want to give a book to someone and maybe they aren't really readers, this is kind of a fun thing to give. Yeah, it's not a traditional book, so you don't really read it traditionally, but I really enjoyed it and I would recommend it. And I would buy it as a gift for people. Like if you don't know they're a reader or you don't know what they like to read, or my friend who I was going to give it to is going through things in her life. And I thought, well, this would help her. So, but she's not getting it. So yeah, that's Good Morning, Good Night by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Okay. And this next book is the one that messed up my pile. I thought my pile was going to tip over for this one, because I really, really enjoyed this, but the actual physical book drove me freaking mad. And that's Othello. Tomorrow, as you see it, I will talk more about Othello and thoughts, because tomorrow you will see me reevaluate my Shakespeare rankings. But this is Othello. Othello is fantastic. Is one of the bigger Shakespeare plays. Iago is one of the most compelling characters in literature. But I hate mass market paperbacks, and I can't get the trade paperback version of the Folger one. And I will complain about that for a very long time. I do not like mass market paperbacks, but there you go. Okay. Oh, and then for highly recommended, the next one I have is Sovereign by C.J. Sansom. And this is the third one. And these last two, actually, I kind of debated where to put it. And this is C.J. Sansom's third book in Matthew Shardlake. And I thought maybe I should put it in the other category because it is a third book. However, I really do feel that you can read these kind of as, you don't necessarily need to read the previous ones. I think maybe you need to read the first one before you read the second one, but I don't really feel that you need to read the first and second one before you read the third one. If that makes any sense. I think it stands alone on its, but the series is great, so I would recommend the series. This one is, they're all so far set during the reign of Henry VIII, and this is the first book where we actually meet Henry VIII, who is just as unpleasant as you would expect. And it is while he is married to Catherine Howard. These books can be dated, at least so far, by wives. The first book is after the execution of Anne Boleyn, and I can't remember if Jane Seymour is still alive in that book or not. And then the second book is during the marriage of Anne of Cleves, and now we're on to Catherine Howard. There's 4 books left in the series and only 1 wife, so we're gonna move past Henry. We're gonna at least get into Edward. We'll see. This one doesn't take place. Well, it doesn't take place in London. It takes place in York during the Royal Progress, where Henry VIII and Catherine Howard, his queen, like traveled around England kind of as a show of strength. And I enjoyed that. I have been to York. So it was fun to hear them talk about places that I have been to. I've been to London too, but when he's in London and talking about it, I don't remember seeing those places because they aren't as preserved, whereas they are in York. So that was really fun. It is a big book. I will say that. As I said, when I talked about it before, C.J. Sansom is like ton of French for me, where I will be reading for an hour and I'll be enjoying my time. It's not dragging, but then I think I will have gone 10% and I've gone 2%. So it's like over 600 pages, but I think it's a really well done. This one was a well done mystery, although slightly, I did figure it out, or I had 2 options of how it would end and it ended up being one of them. But it was still worth reading. I think that he does as a historical fiction novel, this is great. And the one thing I do like about the series is, yes, it's set during the Tudors, but it's not about the Tudors especially. It's about this lawyer guy. And so it's about life during that time and not so much about Henry VIII and all his wives and chopping people's heads off and stuff. So I enjoyed it. And the next one I have not talked about this one in a wrap up because I think Queen of Poisons I didn't either, but that's okay. I'm going to talk about them now. And then when I do my wrap up at the end of this week, it will be what I finished in December on. But this one I finished yesterday, and I wasn't sure where to put this, and I ended up with highly recommended. And this is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. This is a book I've been meaning to read for a very long time, and so I finally got to it. I had a little bit of an unstated goal to read it this year, and I really enjoyed it. Really, I just thought it was it's a very hard story to read. It is hard. It's not hard as in dense, or the reading experience is hard. It's the content can be a little hard. It's set the school year, the 91-92 school year, which is back almost in my day. I'll just say I was my freshman year in college. Anyway, so this was my time capsule book. I think it was written a little bit after that, but it's time capsule-y. And it's about this boy, Charlie, who's writing to someone, telling him about what's going on in his life. And there's something up with Charlie. Like, we do know early on that his friend, before the book started, had committed suicide. So he's dealing with that. We also know that he's had some mental health issues because they talk about him being in a mental hospital and also seeing a psychiatrist. So we know that's going on. It is his freshman year in high school. He's a year older because they held him back because of his time in being in the hospital. But he befriends these 2 seniors, their brother and sister, or stepbrother and sister, and he gets in with their friends. This is a book that's very frequently banned. And not that I think it should be banned, because I don't believe in book banning, but I can see why they want to ban this book, because there is a lot of drug use. There are some LGBTQ themes. It has like the things that people like to ban. And this is a YA book. But it is not a YA book that I would give anyone, I would say upper high school on, because the themes in this book and what Charlie goes through, and I'm thinking about the book as a whole, and so I'm trying to be very vague. There's some really hard things in this book, but it's also such an authentic depiction of teenage life and what teenagers, they might be not going through these really, really hard things, but the thought process of the teenager, and it is so authentic. And I loved it. I really, really loved this book. I almost gave it a 5-star. I didn't quite. Maybe I will still go back and give it a 5-star. I'm not sure. I kind of waffled on it because I felt very, very affected by this book. And I do think that for younger teenagers, that might be too much. But I think it's an important book for like high schoolers, older high schoolers to read. I think it shouldn't be banned, but again. So I would highly recommend that one, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So then I had 2 5-stars this month, but one of them was a reread. And so it was a 5-star before and it's still a 5-star. And it is my book that I started on January 1st. If I wasn't planning to finish it until December 30th, but I finished it early. It's my hunker. Les Misérables. I love Les Mis. I love the musical. I love the book. Yes, this is just read it. I know that is really intimidating. But as I said, well, actually, no, there's a lot. You can read this in a year because there's 365 chapters and it's very easy to just do it in little bits and get it through in a year. I also am going to say something a little sacrilegious here. Yeah, there's nothing really wrong with getting an abridged version of this. Because when you get an abridged version of, now I loved this version. So I'm not saying that this is not stuff that bothered me because I kind of love this stuff, but what gets taken out in the abridged version are things like very long depictions of the Battle of Waterloo and the sewers of Paris. Things that probably aren't germane to the story, but Victor Hugo liked to write about them. I like those things. But I will say translations matter. I read this when I was in high school and I enjoyed it, but a lot of it went over my head for 2 reasons. One, I was in high school and I wasn't mature enough for it. And not that there's anything, it's not like The Perks of Being a Wallflower, that kind of thing. But, just I didn't have enough life experience to appreciate some of the things. But also I read a different translation, which was not as good as this one. This is translated by Christine Donecker. This is the current Penguin edition. So I would say if you want to read Les Misérables, go make sure you get the one by Christine Donecker. If you're looking for a copy that looks like this, it's going to be hard. This particular version, this is the deluxe Penguin one, they don't make these anymore. I had to get this off Thrift Books. As you can see, this is library stuff from the New York Public Library. But you can get the Penguin version of this, which is the same text. It just has a different cover. I will also say I read this in ebook version, and this is my on my shelf one. But the print in this book is not horribly small, so there's that. But I love Les Misérables. Yeah. And the other book. My other 5-star book was the book I needed at the moment. I read it. Maybe it wouldn't be a 5-star if I read it at a different time, but there you go. And I have been recommending this book. I have been talking this book up like crazy, and that is Liar, Temptress, Soldier, Spy for women undercover in the Civil War. I have been really drawn to Civil War nonfiction, and I don't know why. But this one it follows 4 women who were undercover in some way, maybe not so undercover, during the Civil War. 2 for the Confederacy and 2 for the Union. The 2 for the Union are very admirable women. You have so much respect for them. They should be role models and you should know more about them. One presented as a man and fought as a man for a while. She also kind of got in with some of the soldiers. There was some hanky-panky in the tents, but there's her story, and that was actually not uncommon during the Civil War. That happened quite a bit. And the other one was a woman who ran a spy ring and was very instrumental in the ultimate Union victory of the Civil War on the Confederate side. Now, these 2 women will drive you crazy. You will. But they are entertaining. There's a teenager who was not beautiful, but men seldom realized that when they were caught by her charm. And she's pretty audacious. And she's very feisty. And then there's an older woman who is kind of a little bit on the outs of society because she entertains some gentlemen. And society doesn't look high on that. But she also is like, it's not a very private, I mean, it's not a very hidden spy ring, but she has a spy ring, and yeah, they knew, but she gets arrested and with her daughter, who's 7, that's a whole thing. But these women are, if you were to think about sort of a stereotypical antebellum Southern belle, it would be these women. I refer to them as Scarlett O'Hara and Blanche Devereaux. They are very much that. So they are entertaining. I don't find them admirable because I think their cause is not admirable at all. Also, they do, to different extents, voice opinions I strongly do not agree with, but they are entertaining to read about. So this was the book. I needed a book of kick-ass women. And I'm into Civil War stuff because prep, I guess. I don't know. So this was the perfect book at the perfect time. And it was Liar, Temptress, Soldier, Spy, 4 Women Undercover in the Civil War by Karen Abbott. I'm going to hopefully, if this pile knocks over, it's because of that. Darn, I'm going to move that because the Othello book is going to make things pop over. Now, as for read-alongs and events, this was nonfiction November, and I read a fair amount of nonfiction. And Olive, this was her final year hosting it. We thank you so much, Olive, at A Book Olive. You have done a wonderful job. And we will always have nonfiction November. But Olive comes up with 4 words, and I tried to do all 4 words. I didn't quite make it. So we had shot, and for that, I did the Demon of Unrest because it was leading up to the first shots of the Civil War. For join, I did Liar, Temptress, Soldier, Spy because it was women joining the war effort. For code, I did that Librarian because of the Dewey Decimal System. Sorry, I'm grabbing. And then I did not get to path. It didn't happen. I did my best. I did what I could. So yeah, those were my nonfiction November books. And also, Demon of Unrest and Liar, Temptress, Soldier, Spy were Historathon, 4th quarter books for me. I may still read more. I have All That She Carried still sitting on my shelf. I might get to that this month. We'll see. But this was my first year really doing Historathon. I've really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to doing it next year. And I was able to, each quarter read something that fit into that time. And I have a degree in history. I love history, but I sometimes forget to really dive into it now that I'm not in school. And I love that it got me to do that. And so I'm looking forward to doing it again in the future. And let's see what else. And I already talked about my buddy reads. So let's go on to the yearly stats. So I've talked about this before. I had starting with my reading goal, was 165 books. And not only, I blew right past that this month. I'm at 179. So won that one. Now, my owned TBR count, which is books that I've owned and have not read, I've talked about this. My goal for the year was to finish it with at least 1 less book than I started. That is not happening. It's not going to happen because my own TBR is currently 848, which is up 4 from last month. And it's up 29 for the year. So I'm not going to read at least 30 books in December. I'm just not. So yeah, failed that goal. And for print, I'm at 293, which is up 6 from last month and up 61 for the year. But ebook, I'm at 490 because, it's really easy to get a lot of ebooks and not know it because, they're just on a Kindle or a Kobo. I'm at 490, which is down 2 from last month and down 36 for the year. And if you break that down, I have 127 on my Kindle, which is the same as last month, but it's down 29 for the year. And on my Kobo, I have 364, which is down 2 and from last month, and it's down 7 for the year. So ebooks I'm making, I will tell you the reason why I'm making progress on ebooks and not on print books is because I very rarely buy ebooks anymore. Not saying that I don't, but I very rarely do. It's very, I got The Grey Wolf on digital so I could have it the moment it came out, which was 8 o'clock the night before it actually released. I just needed it. Les Misérables, the ebook of that I purchased because I was going to be reading it for a year about. But I usually, most of the ebooks that I read are library books, so that's why I do that. But anyway, I have been talking for like 40 minutes, and so I'm going to wrap it up now. If you made it this far, you get a gold star. You should give me a gold star. Let me know. Give me a little gold star emoji. Let me know if you made it all the way through. Like, subscribe, join my Discord, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.